Hey guys, welcome to a Superbloom podcast with Candace King. It's me, it's Candace. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me. Actually, you know what I'm going to say? I don't know if I am the problem today. I don't know. Feels like I'm the problem because I had a little situation this morning. I'm a little thrown off my game. I just woke up as one does and got my children off to school. Had my cold cup of cold brew, as one does on a warm, late summer day. You know, I've been living in my new house. I got a house. It's almost 100 years old. And I know everyone says, if you buy an old house, you're going to get the old house, new problems. Old house, new problems. Well, and I was prepared for that. I've had problems like, look, toilets don't work. You just need one. Am I right? Or, sometimes your kitchen cabinetry just falls off the wall and tries to kill you. It didn't. It tried, but it failed. But I can hire someone to come and help me drill it back on. You know what I mean? So in the process of that, I have someone coming in to help me and I'm like, I got this. I am cool as a cucumber. I mean, I'm not cool as a cucumber because I'm sweating because the air conditioning is broken downstairs, and it's too cold upstairs. You'd think it'd be reversed, heat rises, but apparently not in this house because I live in the underbelly of the upside down. I'm in Stranger Things over here. It's a 100-year-old house, but somehow I'm stuck in the 80s and the aliens are here and they're messing with me. But I have someone coming in to help me because the house is trying to kill me. But you know what? It's a beautiful day outside. So I say, hello. Hello, Moses. How are you doing today? Isn't it gorgeous? It is a pretty day. And Moses goes, I know, look. And I said, I know. Look at how pretty. And he goes, no, look. And I have beautiful trees on my property. I live in Tennessee. We got those Tennessee trees and I have this beautiful magnolia tree. And then next to it is another beautiful tree. And then he just points and I follow Moses as he points to just part, instead of the red bees, he's parting a sea of bees that now live in the tree in front of my house. And let me tell you, this is not just a bumblebee. This is not just a, oh, hello, bumblebee that's trying to pollinate a flower. This is like girl level of bees. You know what I'm saying? Like my skin's getting itchy from it. And if you don't know that reference, then you're young and do your homework because I can't teach you about this. Know your history, know your herstory, know your their story. I forgot we're on strike. Yep. If you don't know, guys, SAG-AFTRA, there is a strike. So we as entertainers, if you're a member of SAG-AFTRA, we are on strike and we do not talk about shows or movies by title, any of it, because we are on strike. So if you hear that there's an absence of talking about that kind of stuff in any of this interview or interviews around this conversation, that's why. So this is a perfect reminder that I'm just going to describe that there is a possible film from the 90s in which there are two children who are very cute, and one wears glasses and one does not. And one's father works at a home where, like a funeral home. They go out into the forest and they play and they're happy. And then there's an incident where there's a lot of bees and it's very scarring and it's a very sad movie. And you think it's just this movie about cute little children. And then it takes a turn. This is a book, so I can say it. Where the red fern grows ya. You think it's a sweet story, and then you get your first dose of big T trauma from this very popular pop culture piece of entertainment. But it is that level of bees, that is my point. It's a gaggle of bees. It's a bayhive of bees. If you've been to the Renaissance tour, you know how packed that stadium is with all the bays of the bayhives. This is that bees. And sometimes you got to cry until you start laughing. And maybe I did a little bit of that, but I'm sharing this with you because sometimes you also need to know that you're not alone in the world. So all of that is coming together for our conversation today. Laughter is absolutely the best medicine. And then sometimes you do need to cry. And sometimes you need to know that you're not alone and that other people in the world are having a tough day or an infestation of bees. So if you too are having a bad day, I hope I made you laugh. And if you too are having an infestation of bees and you happen to live in the local Nashville, Tennessee area, will you please let me know of a beekeeper's name? Because I've been on the phone for an hour trying to find one. Apparently they're all busy. Busy bee. All right, let's just jump into this conversation. Guys, I'm so excited. We're sitting down today with Jodi Lieberman, Amber J. Lawson, and Zoe Friedman. They founded a nonprofit called Comedy Gives Back in 2011. It's a nonprofit that gives comedians resources, to turn to when times get tough. Comedy Gives Back is the safety net for the comedy community, and they provide financial crisis relief, mental health, and chemical dependency treatment sponsorship, and continued community support. Being alone on stage is part of the job of a stand-up comedian. Feeling alone off stage is unacceptable. These co-founders, Amber J, Jodi, and Zoe, have been working in the comedy scene for decades. So let's just jump in and talk about laughs, cries, and the community that comes together in between. I do love that before we even jumped into this, it's like we're already touching on the fact that Mercury is in retrograde. Amber J, I love that you have, maybe a past flame or a past lover, if I may, maybe giving you attention, because I have a different version of that. And I would love to know what your perspective is, because I had bees visit me this morning, and not just one, not just a few, a whole swarm of them. So my day started with looking outside from my new home being like, wow, what a beautiful day, only to realize that I have an infestation of bees in front of my home. Is that also part of Mercury in retrograde? Just wondering for a friend.
I would say that they're looking for their queen, Candace.
That's what it is? Okay.
They're without their queen. So perhaps they're saying, Candace, be our queen.
I love Zoe's take on it. And I would look up the metaphysical meaning of bees, but I would think sweetness, community, connection, like a blessing on the house. And the bees are our barometer of if we're doing earth right. So it looks like they're coming to you.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, I love all this.
And they're the ones that make plants, they bloom, right? They are
for the Superbloom.
To bring it back to Superbloom.
Totally. It's all on brand.
And you have flowers behind you. Of course they want to come
didn't realize all this Joann's fabric shopping would just really bring in the prosperity.
Well, and so retrograde is all the re's. Where you reflect. Reboot, renew,
set, reset.
And yes, so it's not happening. So we just had a full moon yesterday, and this is a special month because we have super moon yesterday, and we'll have a blue moon. So once a blue moon comes from when two full moons happen in a month period of time. That's what a blue moon means. And we start retrograde. We already have 4 or 5 planets in retrograde, and Mercury goes into retrograde, I think on the 23rd. We're already in the shadow period, as we call retro shade. And it is what gets to come back. So what old stories, relationships are coming back in your life to be revisited. Did I learn the lesson, or do I have to learn it again? That's the question to ask.
Oh, man.
So yes, I had a lover who just showed up at my door and brought me some elixir because I have COVID. And yeah, good thing we're doing this from a distance. The COVID. Coming to nurture me, and I receive.
There we go. All the re's, all the bad girl re's. Yes, all the things. But what I love, I usually just say like God's tested me, and she has a great sense of humor, and I don't know what she's trying to teach me right now, but I usually try to find like, oh, this is good. It's funny. It's funny. And even if I don't see it being funny right now, it'll be funny in the future. Zoe and Jodi, you were talking about Zoe, you got the travel bug, which seems to be going around, where I too earlier this week got stuck trying to get home from Cabo, which sounds like such champagne problems, but I got stuck at 2 different airports in Houston and a La Quinta by the airport. And so, like that's the thing. That's where you got to find the humor, right? You got to find the funny in all these situations.
I found Bob at the Sheraton Pearson Toronto airport, who had just been on oil rig for 2 months, and the bar was about to close, and he was going to he hadn't had a drink, for months. He's like, I'd like 2, and I'd like to get this lady too. Like I missed my connection in Toronto. It was the last plane out. It was 1 a.m. And I loitered. I went to the bar. I had with Bob and the way I met over there, had an adventure, talked to him about his, oil rig adventures, had a couple beers, took the air train back to the terminal, met another woman named Hermat who was I felt like I was 20 years old backpacking through Europe again. I had these like funny connections, and I fell asleep with my feet up on a chair at about 4 a.m, only to be like awoken by people coming in for the morning flights. And like, I think my crack was showing. Like I had just fallen asleep, a vagrant. I was a vagrant for the night. I am a professional woman with an 18-year-old child. What happened?
When I made it back to the airport, there was someone sleeping on the floor with like a TV show. It looked like, CSI propped up on their phone and a sound machine. They had like been traveling with like a mini sound machine. And I was just like, what a time. Just when we thought the world couldn't get more upside down, it's like, no. We're still just twisting and turning. To your credit, one of my favorite things about being out in the world, in like 2023 in this post 2020 world and existence, my favorite place is airport bars. Because it's like this beautiful, like anonymity, cross section. Everyone's going somewhere, coming from somewhere. Everyone's got a story.
Everybody has a story.
And you just get a little liquored up on some cheap Chardonnay. That hard chard just really softens everyone up.
Everybody just tells their story after their hard chard. Yeah, I love that when I did backpack, that's where you meet people on the train and they would tell their stories and tell you the hostel that has the best, like, included breakfast or the best, all of those where you just, that's the one rule I never listened to my parents who, they might have said, don't talk to strangers. I love strangers. I love talking to them. I love hearing people's stories. Because everybody does have one, and there's value in all of it.
Well, I'd imagine the world of comedy, it's also a really wonderful way to not only meet people, but hear other people's stories. I would imagine being, working in comedy, and as much as you'd be traveling, as much as you'd be talking with people who share their stories on stage for a living, that it's also a really wonderful way to connect with other people in your industry. I want to know, can you share with our listeners right now how you guys all met?
Comedy. Through laughter.
I thought you were going to say the joke.
Well, I will, but I was going to go sincere first. We always say 3 chicks walked into a comedy club and asked, "Can we change the world through laughter?" And that's really what happened.
That's how we started our organization. But how we know each other personally is through, as Zoe said, comedy. And Zoe and I met many, many years ago when I was working at Just for Laughs and she was working at Letterman, and we were both scouting talent, and we would talk to each other and get each other's notes on who was up and coming. Amber J and I met in Los Angeles, and then we all met, and the rest is history.
And now we're the safety net.
Well, then, so after knowing each other through comedy, truly through that, I knew Jodi for a long time, as Jodi said, and I knew Amber J for a bit at that point, and they came up to me in 2011 at the Improv on Melrose in LA and said, "Do you think we can change the world through comedy?" And I was like, "How much time do you have?" I've been thinking about this for a long time. The power of laughter and the power of comedy is talking about people telling their stories, right? We have been spoken in oral tradition through the years, and comics are part of that. They're truth tellers. They speak, they tell their stories. We just came from Montreal, and you see all the new faces, which are these comedians that are, plucked pretty early in their careers. And that when comedians start, part of the direction is let the audience know who you are. So it's that kind of, I'm this person, I identify as this, and then jokes on top. So we just spent a week hearing everybody's stories, every comedian's stories, and the connectivity of that, taking something personal, making universal as an audience member is amazing. But the community and the tribalization that happens around laughter is more powerful than so many things, in my opinion. I recently learned that laughter and crying, those bases, those emotions are in our reptilian brain. They are some of the oldest emotions, and they are actually, we are hardwired to share those emotions to bring in community. Because when you cry or when you laugh, you connect, right? If you see somebody cry, you have compassion for them. You want to go help them. They're telling you a story. Thank you for sharing, your vulnerability with me, And laughter, maybe a comic's telling a self-deprecating joke. I love self-deprecating humor because it makes you kind of go, yes, me too. Or, they put themselves, kind of joke to have you come in. we get to kind of share. Sorry, I think about comedy and the power of it. And that's really how it's all started, that we started Comedy Gives Back. And now we are the safety net for the comedy community. We help comedians who, have a very hard life. They are the, masked clowns, the sad clowns a little bit, not all. That's a maybe generalization, but like they have a hard life and, on the road and, paycheck to paycheck and highs and lows. And, Comedy Gives Back tries to be there and meet them where they are.
Yeah, comedy is definitely a long game. Anyone I know who is a professional comic on the road, like it's not just like I just like it or it's just fun. It's like it is in their bones, in their body, in their soul. It is like a full, they just love it with all of who they are, because it is a hard life. Exactly what you're saying. You're constantly on the road. You don't know what happens next, but
lots of rejection.
A lot of rejection. When did you each individually get bit by the comedy bug and realize, I want to be part of this community. I want to be in that room. I want to be, or I just love it. When did you each individually get bit by the bug of your career?
I would say in the womb, Candace. Karen started a comedy club in 1963 in New York. So it was, that was my sister, who's older than me, says the club, the Improv, was the firstborn. Then she came, and then I came. So I'm the youngest of three, if we consider the club as a child in our lives. But yeah, so I was really born into it. I do remember my dad so I didn't know anything other than being around comedy my life. But I do remember when I was 9, 10, 12, early adolescence, my dad would take me to sets of television shows. I got to go to Taxi and I got to go to Welcome Back, Kotter, which were iconic shows at the time of my childhood. And I do remember saying, I want in on this. I loved it. And I went to he took me to the first taping of the Letterman morning show in 1981. I was in the front row with him. I had a Spider-Man t-shirt on and pigtails. And I was like, I don't know what's going on. It was the craziest show. And I said, I want in. And I was lucky enough to get an internship. And I was a talent receptionist for 2 years. And it was the start of my career. So I got bit early and then had these moments where I remember saying, I want in on that. Oh, and I wanted to be a child star too, but not in comedy. I just wanted to be in commercials. So anyway, it's a long story, but yeah, very early on.
Jodi, what about you?
I grew up in the 80s and loved the sitcom world. I watched every single bad sitcom on TV. I used to do my schedule in the fall of what times everything was on and what I was watching. I knew I wanted to work in entertainment. I knew I wanted to do something in that vein. I went to school. I kind of fell into it. I started to work at Just for Laughs, the comedy festival here in Montreal. I was born and raised here. I fell in love with it. I don't think I really understood what stand-up was. As a teenager, I would go to a local club. I used to think people just got up on stage and started talking. And then when I started to work at Just for Laughs, I realized, there was a whole art form behind being a stand-up, and they truly are artists. I just fell in love with the process and how hard people worked to get that great 5-minute set and to get that point of view. And then, I started working in the mid 90s at Just for Laughs, and I never left the comedy community. So I've been in it almost 30 years. And as Zoe was saying before, there's such a strong community, and you see that every year at Just for Laughs. And when we didn't have it for 2 years during COVID, we all missed it. We all missed that yearly gathering of the whole industry. And it's great that we've all kind of, have been in it for so long, and we've seen the ups and downs. And the three of us came together and realized there was a need in this community for something like Comedy Gives Back, because comedians weren't seen as artists and they were left out. They didn't have the union. They didn't have a music care or an actors fund to really go to a place where when they needed help. And that's what we are.
Amber J?
Yes. I started out on the Good Ship Lollipop at the age of 3 at Santa Calagon Days in Independence, Missouri. That is where the star was born. And I proceeded to be a performer in Chicago as a drag queen. And And then at Second City in Chicago, I moved to LA to be a star. And I had a little success up front. Then I went to the Sundance Film Festival and I was like, oh, the power is in producing. And I came back and I produced a short film that premiered at Cannes and I started producing. And that's been the gig ever since. I kind of transformed. And it's interesting to think of like changes and chapters of our lives that, whether naturally or changes that were thrust upon us. I then became an executive. I ran comedy at various startups. I ended up running all of programming at AOL, and charity or giving back has always been a through line in everything I do. Comedy has always been a through line. And then my piece of the puzzle of this trifecta of our holy trinity is digital and cutting edge technology. So I came through live streaming. And when we first came out of the gate and Comedy Gives Back, we were live streaming comedy events. Our first one in 2011 was New York, Chicago, LA. Then 2013, we did a 24-hour global digital telethon from Australia, London, New York, and LA, which we got nominated for an Emmy for. Meow, meow. And so we've always been adding digital. And then I went on my own transformational journey. And now I support women who are going through changes in their life, career, relationships, aging, whatever that may be. And that's exactly what we're working with the comedians, right? When they are going through changes in the ups and downs of their career, whether it's mental health, chemical dependency, or community, or they get stuck on the side of the road, they could use a therapist or they could use flat tire being fixed. That is what we are serving as the safety net of the comedy community.
I guess I never really thought about that. I mean, we, as of this recording, SAG and AFTRA were on strike, for a myriad of reasons, but I never really thought about that as a community of comedians, like who they would turn to. And again, the job isn't necessarily just the 5 minutes or 20 minutes or 30 minutes. It's not just the set that you're performing on stage. So much of the job is getting from one club to the next club to the next club and touring, managing your own merch, managing your own schedule, getting your next booking. And so, and it's not this unheard of industry. It's not this unheard of, job. No one's like, what, a stand-up comedian? What is this that you speak of? It is very ingrained in our culture, pop culture, society. And so the fact that there isn't somewhere for this community to turn and that you guys have really provided that is beautiful. I love an inciting incident. I know if you're comfortable kind of sharing with us what that is, I know it is also a very emotional inciting incident of how this organization, the root of why you've decided to really give support, not even just financial for if someone did, Amber J, you mentioned a tire on the road, but also the mental health element and aspect of this community.
So, it is no secret that, comedians do sort of struggle with mental health issues, right? It might be even predisposition to why they choose the career. We don't know what comes first, the chicken or the egg. All we know is, unfortunately, there's a pretty strong legacy of comedians who have taken their own lives, who have committed suicide, whether by intentionally taking their own life or overdosing with substances. So we are called to that as one of our main pillars. And when Brody Stevens took his life in 2019, he was somebody who was so integral in the LA scene. And he was at that level where I think he was coming up and he always was very truthful and honest in his comedy about his mental health, which a lot of comedians do talk about it. When we lost him in 2019, it devastated the comedy community. And what was really profound for Amber J, Jodi, and I was when we heard sort of the story of what kind of transpired right before or leading up to. Now, again, mental health and being suicidal and depression are things that are hard to change the outcome. But, Brody, like a lot of comedians, had success and he got into SAG-AFTRA, as you spoke, and got insurance through SAG-AFTRA and was managing his mental health issues with probably the best doctor he's ever had. He was on a really good path and his show got canceled. Again, happens to every comic. I mean, if you have that level of success at some point, you might not have it. And his health insurance changed and he couldn't afford the Cobra because Cobra's a fucking ripoff. Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse.
Yes, you fucking can, especially when we're talking about healthcare insurance in this country.
Yeah, right. So he switched doctors because his health insurance changed and there was a transition in his medicine and his health care. Again, we can't ever say that if we were there able to maybe pay for his Cobra, right? Like imagine we weren't in existence helping comedians at that point. If somebody said, Comedy's Back might pay for your Cobra and then you could stay with your doctors, right? And then you can, again, we don't know what the outcome is, but that is kind of how we can step up and meet a comic where they are. So that was, before that, we were using comedy to raise awareness and money for various causes. And it was really that moment where we pivoted to help comedians and comedians only, because when you look around and you see there's Actors Fund, there's SAG-AFTRA, there's a Writers Guild, there's this, and stand-up comedians, fall through the cracks. And even music cares exist for musicians. Yeah. And it's sort of like, shame on us, right? Shame on our community. And, we know that a lot of people, when we opened or made this pivot, a lot of people, especially people on our board, which are high level comedy producers, like, oh, we wanted to do this. We wanted to do something like this. Like it's not that people haven't thought about it. Just wasn't the three awesome women sitting on your podcast, Kansas, that brought to. No, we are three really amazingly capable, women who put together are super powerful, but right time, right place, right people. Like we were introduced to somebody who ran Music Cares for many years, who is on our board, who really helped us fill out how to do this, because we all come from comedy producing. We don't know how to run nonprofits. So we've been learning, we know the community, and we fill in with smart people around us that help us. But we were able to open our doors and then pandemic happened. So all of a sudden, our original vision, which was, if people don't know what Music Cares does, which is how we originally envisioned is, hey, I'm a comedian. I fell behind because I had medical bills, so I haven't paid my, rent. We pay the landlord a month of rent. It's a bridge, it's a grant. It's not a loan. Chemical dependency, mental health therapy, we resource and pay for that as well. It's all in progress to, again, support comedians so they can do what they do best, which is make this world laugh, because I think we all agree that laughter is, really important. I think it's important more now than ever. And yeah, when again, there's a long, unfortunate legacy of comedians who have mental health and we've lost too soon. But it was really that Brody, that because we were already set up doing what we were doing, but we were doing it for, hunger in America or malaria no more, or, like a lot of great causes, but a lot of those causes have a lot of people doing work for them, and nobody was doing it for the comedians. So it was this really super kind of significant shift, but and the alignment I feel in the community in doing this is amazing. It's again, right time, right place, right need. Comics have become artists with a big A, and that's what we want to support and treat them as.
It is interesting. I didn't really even think about how comedy is, I feel like, one of the few creative spaces in which mental health is not only, mental health. I think we need to destigmatize mental health and mental illness just in general. Like we all like to be like, what? La 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 la. We don't know. It's like, no. It affects so many people in the world. And if it doesn't affect you directly, someone within your family, it's just insane to me that there's still a stigma around it at this point. But also so many other creative industries, like if you're an actor, that is a completely different, perspective of like performative, and I don't know, that's a whole other thing. Maybe if you're a writer, but even if you're a writer on something to really dive into mental health or mental illness, that's going to be going through like a studio or a network, or it's going to be the rewrites alone. But for comedy, anyone who really wants to talk about it and look at their own mental health or their own mental illness and really share in their experience. I mean, it's one of and really dissect it and understand it and make it palatable for an audience to then want to understand it and see all the different perspectives of it. I feel like comedy is this really specific area in which it is done and kind of brings together not just the community of comedians, but lets people in the audience in on maybe their experience. So to be able to give the community that kind of foundation to fall back on is really powerful. I mean, Jodi, in your experience with Just for Laughs, have you seen comedians be more open in the past decade about really wanting to talk more about mental health or mental illness and just being more vulnerable on stage in kind of this new version of comedy?
I do. I really do. And I think also COVID opened up the door to an even playing field where it was almost okay not to be okay. And I feel after COVID, mental health was very much talked about. And I do feel in the past, maybe decade that people have been much more open about it and people have experienced. And I feel when people are authentic and vulnerable on stage, their comedy is better. And when they're opening up and being true to themselves, that's when they are the funniest. I mean, if you take an example about John Mulaney, who just went through a whole intervention and he talks about it, I mean, it just brings his audience in. You realize, oh, he's just a normal guy. He goes through issues. He had problems and he was brave enough to share it on stage with, a huge audience. And his vulnerability just, took a stand up. I mean, he was always great. Don't get me wrong. I love John. I think it just went to a whole other level.
Yeah, he was probably a comedian that didn't really delve in, right? He definitely was more of a joke teller and not like as sort of kind of forthcoming. And then with the intervention and his sobriety, it does feel his comedy has taken up a notch and his popularity has been taken up a notch because I think, like Jodi said, and we started as you show me your, you show your belly. I want to show you mine, like that vulnerability. I will also say at the Just for Laughs Festival, I know we're talking a lot about it, but we are all just there for a week, that Rainn Wilson did the keynote about kind of comedy and mental health and well-being. And his whole refrain is, show me your crack. He made a joke about it, but like allowing, our cracks to be seen and let light into our cracks, And so he kind of made it silly and dirty, but like, it's to that, like we connect more powerfully. And I think laughter is part of that in people. I do think like, it was an interesting discussion a couple of years ago when Hannah Gatsby had her special that Nanette, I think it was called, that was very popular and it was very buzzy and people were talking about it. But I remember she said something about how comedy and the process of her stand-up, I can't remember the exact language, but basically kind of creates like getting stuck in the self-deprecation and that it's harmful. And she doesn't know she'll do comedy because of that. And I was really interested in the effect that special had on the whole comedy community. People were really talking about it. To me, and I'm not a comic, but I do know a lot of comedians, I would say the opposite. I would say that the performance and the talking about one's mental health, whether it's through self-deprecation or not, it actually is part of the healing. If you can talk about it, and you can make a joke about it, it doesn't have that same power over you, because if it really took you down, you couldn't be making a joke about it.
Yeah.
Right? I think, again, so it was an interesting discussion. Like, I think stand-up, it makes them a better stand-up. And I think if you ask them, it probably also is part of their process in healing. But I could be wrong about that. Whenever people say, you've been in stand-up a long time, do you ever get the urge? And I said, if I ever get the urge, I just call my therapist. But same difference, to just like an audience of one, same difference.
I love performing for my therapist. I'm like, I got him to laugh. I am paying you to laugh at me.
Laugh at me, right?
Jazz hands, big trauma, little trauma, big T, little T. Amber J, especially as a producer and in the digital world, I'm so curious what you have to say about comedy right now. I definitely want to get, seeing comedians perform now. There's obviously some shows you go to where the phones are completely removed and they're in those little like bean bags and you just don't see them for the hour because everyone's trying to keep everything offline and just be in the moment. And then there's other comedy shows. There's a whole other wave of comedy right now where everyone wants the phones. They want that little clip. They want that little TikTok or that Instagram clip where someone's yelling at them from the audience so that it can go viral. What is your, like, I'm so analog. It makes me I like never want anything to change, but I know that I have to. Like, this is like,
we have to embrace change. It's coming whether you like it or not. So you better like look to embrace it. And I could break down what change means, but I won't, I digress. I shall not go there. Well, I worked at National Lampoon. Our first viral video was Michael Vick. It was 2006, 2007 with Adam Devine and the National Lampoon Lemmings with my partner, Jay Leggett at the time. So I've been around this a long time and there is an interesting shift happening. And we've seen different phases of it where artists of all kinds have taken on all the elements themselves and not given away or not sold off their licensing or their ownership to the studios and networks and have been able to distribute themselves, make lots of money, own their audience. And when you have a big following, you can. And it's interesting because before the actors went on strike, one of the writers came to me and she was like, we should just start our own thing. And I said, you mean like YouTube? It already exists. And like, that's great. And there are downsides to that too. And it's, do you want to take responsibility and ownership for your success and build an empire and business? Like Bert Kreischer, who was an inspiration to me of how he just went out on this fully loaded tour that was in stadiums, brought us along with him and brought comedians, whether older comedians or younger up and coming comedians, and exposing them to audiences. But he said, I wouldn't get invited to this. I had to make it happen myself. And we are at a tipping point, I believe, in that, what am I going to make myself, or what am I going to, these are the rules of engagement to play with whoever. And if they're creating the platform, they can make those rules of engagement and you can agree to it or not to agree to it. And you can empower yourself and take 100% responsibility for 100% of your results and go out in the world and create what you want.
Who are some of your favorite comedians up and coming right now? Who are the ones that you're like, yes, this is like, I see the long game here, or that just had you getting some good belly
Jack
laughs?
White was awful cute.
Jack Whitehall.
There you go.
Well, he's on his way. I think he's a star. So I think he's already a star in the UK. So Jodi, you're on the scene.
I'm partial. So I'm a talent manager by day and comedy is back by night. So I have some clients that I'm working with. One is Gina Yashere, who is on a CBS show right now, Bottom Parts Abishola, who is amazing talent. And she was just at the festival doing a bunch of shows in her solo show. And she's out right now doing her Woman King of Comedy tour that's almost ended. She has one show in Toronto tomorrow night, and Portland and Los Angeles. And then I work with another woman, Erin Jackson, who is really hilarious and funny, and I feel the world should know who she is. You know, some of my favorite comics, I've known John Mulaney since he started back in like 2005, 2006, and been tracking his career. I'm trying to think who else are some of the younger up and coming comics. Frankie French, another one of my clients, who is amazing. We just recorded an album and that will be out hopefully the end of this year, beginning of next year.
For me, I love Neil Brennan. He fucking rocks my comedy world. He is funny. He is sharp. He is smart. There's nobody, I don't know. I think he's tremendous. There was a new face, I'll give her a shout out, that stood out, named Leslie Liao, who still has a day job at Netflix. So I love it. She's like in HR at Netflix. And her coworkers were at the festival. What's that?
She must be busy.
Yeah, exactly. And they were like, and people were like, oh, are Netflix courting her she's a new face for a new special? I was like, well, they're coworkers.
Yeah.
So, but she is terrific. And I'm sure she won't be in her day job much longer. I love Alice Waterland. She has really had a lot of more success as an actor these days, but I think she's really funny and unusual. Yeah. What about you? Amber J., who about you? Or what about you, Candace? Who do you like?
Well, I loved Hannah Berner.
Hannah
She
Berner.
was fun. And who closed the top 10? The Indian woman. What's her name?
Zarna Garg.
She's great. And
She'll have a sitcom.
She'll definitely have a sitcom. And she had a special on Prime. But the last show of the festival that we watched was Stumptown. Is that what it's called?
Oh,
Stumptown.
Stamptown
was hilarious.
It was like a clown, like a modern day clown, not clown makeup, but like very European feeling, very very fun, fast paced, a lot of different movement, a lot of different moving pieces. And ridiculous and fun, and like a great midnight show because it kept you awake. And they actually are on tour. I bought tickets for them in LA a couple months ago, but the performance was canceled for some reason. But definitely, if it comes to town, Stamptown.
Stamptown.
Great.
I've known Heather McMahon. We have mutual friends.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
so I've known her for a long time. So to watch her go from like what she's accomplished in the last decade has just been just a joy to be in the nosebleed section watching it from afar. And then I've known Josh Blue for a long time out in Denver. And so to know him coming off of like his first kind of like big success, and then also to have like the kind of more relaxed period in between where he's still just always been on tour and touring, and then he just was back on America's Got Talent. He placed very, very high up, and I forget if he was in like third place or second place, but it was huge. And so and literally it was just like a text pop up a couple years ago being like, hey, if you don't mind, like maybe giving a shout out. I was like, what have you been up to? You're on our televisions tonight. So it's so fun. But all that to say, which goes back to the point, is that the close-knit, I mean, I say these names and you immediately know who they are. You all know the names that you're mentioning to each other, that comedy is such a community, and a community that we all reap the benefits of as an audience who go and get to enjoy their storytelling from the relaxing seats while they're just on stage, just putting their guts out on the floor. And so the fact that they have you guys who have come together to create Comedy Gives Back to really make sure that when they leave the stage, that they're going to have a support system is so huge. And so I'm so grateful as a fan of comedy that all the comedians we get to enjoy, you guys get to lift up and raise up in all the wonderful, beautiful ways.
Thank you, Candace. We say that the job of the stand-up is to be alone on stage, but to feel alone off stage is unacceptable. And Comedy Gives Back is changing that.
I love that. For anyone listening who is a comedian or knows a comedian and can benefit from Comedy Gives Back, do you guys have a call to action? Do you have any other ways that we can continue to support you so you can support our favorite comedians when in their times of need?
You can make a donation either at our website, comedygivesback.com, big donate button right there. You can also text LAUGH, LAUGH, to 707070.
In case you don't know how to spell laugh.
Well, there are.
It could be LAFF. You could be laugh.
Don't even right. A lot of those are kind of wacky, punny sort of things, but it's a laugh like the LAUGH.
The unfunny version of laugh.
The unfunny version of
the
laugh.
real one.
Perfect. Right, the non-wacky version of laugh.
Oh, man. Well, thank you guys, Jodi, Zoe, Amber J. Thank you so much for hanging with me today. I hope your Mercury in retrograde just gets better and better, and our once in a blue moon just shines bright on all of you. Thank you guys so much.
Mm-hmm. Right back at you, Candace. Thank you for having us.
A Superbloom podcast is hosted by me, Candace King, produced by Melissa D. Montz and Diamond Imprint Productions, edited by Diane Kang, post-production sound by Coco Lawrence, and advertising partnership with Acast.